Welcome to the Student Perspective, the Reality of American Education System podcast. It might be a mouthful, but we've got a lot to discuss about.
We hope to provide a deeper insight into the positivities and pitfalls of the American education system.
We will talk about in-depth about the cost of education,
the benefits of education,
how our system compares to systems worldwide,
the different kinds of education in America,
the relationships between teachers and students,
and the impacts of COVID-19 on education.
Starting off, as college students, we all have experience in the secondary education system. First, I want to talk about an overall view of higher education cost and how over the past decade, the escalating price for college education has become a prominent concern among the American public. Costs include outlays for salaries, wages, benefits like purchases of goods and services, student financial aid, and facilities and equipment. This concept is relevant in that a decision by governmental bodies for more funding to higher education means that those funds are not available for the other public services like K through 12 schools.
How does the cost of education affect American citizens after they graduate college?
Well, I think definitely talking more about student loans and having to pay it off, I think that can be very impactful because it's usually a decent amount of money and it's really hard for people to pay that off completely.
What steps do you think you could take to lowering the cost of higher education?
I think choosing a college, a certain college wisely, and just making sure that you checking how much it's going to cost you, taking advantage of income tax savings for college, a big one which is applying for scholarships and grants. Definitely maybe thinking about community college first and then seeing how you feel after that. And yeah, those are some options that you can do.
Devin, do you want to talk about the benefits?
I was going to ask one more question about the cost, actually. Do you think, for costing, being a in-state, tuition student would be better than going to another college outside of tuition?
Yes, because that's one thing that I'm doing, and I think that it definitely saved me a lot of money, considering I was going to go out of state in California, which was way more expensive. So I think picking a college in-state is a better option too if you're trying to save money and be able to afford living there.
Definitely. My roommate is from Georgia. I don't know why he's here. This is Colorado. Why are you here?
Yeah, right.
His tuition's $12,000 compared to mine, which is only $6,000.
That's insane.
I was like, dude, what are you doing?
Yeah, and then, but you also have to think about the experience because some people really care about the experience when it comes to college.
Yeah.
Not for me personally. I just wanted to get my degree, be able to go live my life wherever I'd like to after I get my degree. But it's so much cheaper here, especially for me who's a commuter student, that I only owe about $6,000 a semester and I'm good to go. I don't even have to take loans, which is awesome. So
that's great.
Yeah, it really depends on the person though.
You want to continue us, Devin, with your benefits?
I'll continue with the benefits, yes. But starting off, if we want to just talk about employment, starting with having educations, if you get less than a high school degree, which I don't understand how you don't do that. It's unemployment rate around that point in the United States in 2019 was about 5.5%. It's probably gone up a lot more, but there hasn't been any really recent studies on that. High school 4%, and then if you want to go all the way up to a doctoral degree, it's only less than 1%. So as you get higher in the education, the employment goes down, and then it's the opposite of employment, and it goes up as the higher education you get.
Do you think the quality of the position is why people go into secondary education? Because you get more benefits that way, better insurance, a nicer office, and a better work environment altogether?
Yes, because one, you do have a job of your choosing as you go on a higher degree, but also in a survey, the rest of the stuff, it's said that people with less than a high school diploma, only have the 83% job satisfaction, but it's just kind of while in bachelor degrees or higher, it's 89% enjoy their job more. So even though it is a 6% difference, that still can make a lot more in a whole United States population.
And then I have a question for our group. I know we're all in college, we're here, but how many family members, friends are neighbors do you know that didn't go to college or are still very successful?
Most everybody I knew
Yeah,
went to
see,
college.
yeah.
Yeah.
It's
Everyone
a
I know.
popular opinion.
Everyone I knew went to college, but the only person I don't know, like fully, was my father actually. He went to college for 2 years, but he didn't get any degree at all because he dropped out to join the military. But later on in life, he's now working for a company making more than 6 figures. So it's like, it took him over 30 years to get to that point. The rest of the years was like only like 50,000 and below his pay. So it definitely takes a lot longer without the education. But if you want to put an effort for the education, you get the money a lot sooner.
Zae, would you like to continue for us?
Yeah, so I was looking into how the US compares to different countries worldwide with like different grading scales and how much time students spend in classes, how different universities around the world figure out like how much each class is worth and going towards your credit, your hours to figure out when you can graduate, and GPAs and stuff, as well as like different test scores for high schoolers around the world.
What country or region has the best education, in your opinion?
Yeah, so that's actually a really interesting question because according to one survey, the country that had most students in time for longest was Chile, with an average per year of 1,007 hours in a school year. And what's really interesting is their test scores, because in math, their test scores was not only below the US's, was far below the average for the tests. They were like the bottom, like 30%, third. So it's really interesting because it doesn't always correlate to like how many hours. If we're going purely off of test scores across science, math, and reading, Singapore, bar none, has the best. They're ranked number 1 in this 2019 study, followed by Japan and then Hong Kong. The US is typically like lingers around average. Math, we fall about 10 places below average actually. So Americans really struggle in mathematics. But
I mean, I understand why. I hate it.
Yeah.
So, like, going off of like the hours that you were having,
Yeah.
do you think having more or less hours during like school days is more beneficial or negative?
I think it depends on how those hours are used. Because Sweden, we all know the stereotype of the Sweden education system being really great. And they, for lower secondary and middle school, have the lowest number of hours. So, but they use it really, really effectively. Whereas for lower secondary or middle school, Mexico has the highest number of hours, but their education isn't that great. So you can spend all the time you want, but if you're not using that effectively, it's really hard to make your system good.
So it's kind of like a balance between time and work effort and finding that balance where you're not burning out, but you're still using your time well to further your knowledge.
Absolutely, and I think student burnout is such a massive problem, especially in the United States. We students, even before college, I know I was spending 4 hours a night doing homework. And like that's just not sustainable for vast majority of students.
Piggybacking off of that, what is your take on homework across the world education?
I think the practice is good, but assigning busy work for busy work is obnoxious.
Redundant.
Yeah, it's redundant, and it just makes students more frustrated than anything because they're at home and maybe their parents don't know what they're doing and they can't help if the student has a question. So it just makes it really tricky.
Like, personally, this is not a question, but like personal experience, you would have going to like high school, you could have like after school activities, so you won't be getting home till like 6 or 7 o'clock, and then your teachers would assign like 2 of your 3 hours or 4 hours of homework was just like do whatever you did in class over and over, but it wasn't like then it was just never used on the test.
Yeah.
And for me, personally, I feel like I had more homework in middle school than I did in high school. And I also feel like high school didn't prepare me enough for like college and like how it was going to be a way like different style of learning. So I feel like high school needs to do better like preparing you for that and like studying and like notes. And yeah, I think that was, my high school didn't do a great job at doing that.
So like when I applied to CMU, one of my things that my mom told me was like for every like credit for that class is how many hours you have to put homework each day for that class. I got 12 credits. I'm not spending 12 hours on homework alone. Maybe an hour or two if I spend my time wisely, but I don't need that extra time.
Yeah, I definitely feel like I have a lot less homework now than I did in high school.
So I was wondering, so like in the United States, our like schooling system is like you're like learn for the test and you're all prepared for the test. Is that like different anywhere else, and is it like more successful?
Yeah, so a lot of different countries do a little bit more broad. Teaching to the test is a very American style of teaching. A lot of different countries will look for proficiency in their students, and there's a little bit more flexibility in what they can teach and how they can teach it. And they are able to like come up with a curriculum that works for their students. Whereas in America, we strictly teach the test, which doesn't benefit anyone other than maybe administration and how they look in standings and rankings and funding.
Yeah, so speaking of American education, something that we really struggle with is early childhood education. When I was doing concurrent school in high school, my professor would literally drill this into our minds: your brain is 90% developed by the age of 5. And to think about that the rest of your development is after 5 years old, is crazy. But it's true, there's been study after study. And early childhood is so ignored, it's really frustrating. Lower income students struggle more, not only because of the environment they're currently in, but the environment they were in the past. There's a lot of different childhood education centers, but it's so expensive that most parents can't afford it, especially in today's economy. And it's really, it's just frustrating to see that happening. And the more education you learn before 5 years old, the more successful you will be for the rest of your life. And I don't even mean like good test scores, good reading scores, math scores, science, all the above. I mean just managing your life and managing your stress and being a productive human being all overall.
And I'm sure socialization, making friends too.
Yeah.
It gets taught in early education as well.
Yeah, actually that's why my parents made sure I did it, even though we were low income. They made sure I had a early childhood education. Even if it wasn't the best, they did what they could for me. And it's how I learned to talk to others, and it has definitely carried over throughout the years. And a lot of people who do struggle with communicating with others were actually shown to either have no siblings or they didn't have early childhood and were held back in elementary school. So there's definitely evidence there proving that early childhood really does matter throughout the rest of your life.
Okay, you mentioned being held back. How does No Child Left Behind, that mentality, affect students? So like pushing kids forward even if they may not be ready for the next grade level.
It can go either way. Sometimes that works because some students do need that extra push, but I feel like other times not letting a student have their time to get past that stage in life can, how do I say this? It can stunt them from growing further at all.
What would you do to like improve it, like be taught or something in that?
I just want it to be as important as the rest of education is. I know that we're about average, but early childhood education is just so ignored. I feel like if we make it as important as the other aspects of American education, it's going to improve American citizens' lives tenfold.
Yeah, and you keep mentioning American early education. what I think is really interesting is that in other places like in Europe, they actually provide free early education for students. And I think in Germany, students have to go to early education and they're not allowed to be homeschooled or anything like that, which I think is really interesting.
Yeah, I like how Germany does it because early childhood education in America is so expensive. I mean, it's awful. Most parents can't afford it and they try to homeschool their children to the best of their abilities, but they're working 9-to-5 jobs. They don't really have time, which is why I really wish that America would look at the other countries and say, oh, maybe we should try that too to see if that could help people out.
Is there like any like studies on like the benefits or negatives of homeschooling, public schooling, and private schooling for those early years and later on?
Yeah, so public school, you have a better social aspect, you know how to speak with others more proficiently, but academics tend to be lower because of peer pressure is what they found. And then private school, although they tend to be more strict people later on in life because of just the way they were practically raised through their education, they do typically go on to better schools and have better opportunities later in life. I didn't look into homeschooling quite as much because I wanted to go into more of like the bigger school systems, but homeschooling it's somewhere in between private and public. Some students can still go to high schools. I know a few friends who did that just for one class so they can still learn that social aspect, but their parents are teaching them exactly what they want to be. And the only problem I find with homeschooling is the education can be very narrow and a lot of opportunities can be missed because they miss certain aspects of education that everybody else has achieved.
So like you were like describing that like it does bring like patience and stuff, but like do you really think that America, because America, even though it's not the best schooling, has been like really focused on the STEM kind of like thing of like focusing on math and science constantly and English, but what do you think about like all the other topics that could be like history or like anything else?
Like art.
Yeah, art.
I feel like the arts and everything else other than STEM is really ignored, which is really sad because there's so much talent that is kind of just getting pushed to the side. From personal experience, I was in band. I know Devin was too, and I have a few others in the Magic Stampede with me. And it's so frustrating when the STEM majors get all these new things and we're still struggling to get instruments that work right. And even in high school, I mean, how long was it, do you know, for the new instruments, the new brass instruments to come around?
New brass instruments ever since Crabtree,
so about what,
director.
17 years before?
15 to 17 years.
15 to 17 years before we had new instruments that were all in tune. And I mean, like, my mellophone would fall apart at random times, and I actually had to glue it back together once, which was so fun. So yeah, it's really sad to see the arts and history just get completely ignored, and it's unfortunate.
And it's really unfortunate too, I think, because art plays such a huge role in development as a child for children. Like, there's a reason we push art classes and music classes, especially in early education, and why parents will play Beethoven for their babies.
Right.
You know, music plays such a huge role in preventing Alzheimer's later on and all of that good stuff. So.
Yeah, and not only that, music or the arts can actually help growth STEM, because even though music is all about flowing and beautiful, there's a lot of math in it. You have to count, you have to be on time, you have to know what's going on.
You have to do fractions.
You have to do fractions. So I feel like if one part is ignored, it kind of affects everything else for sure.
Like playing music, it does like focus on it, but I'm curious, what's your guys' opinion on the recorder? Because it does help you a lot, because it like teaches you how to like, well, play the instrument and how to like read it, because you're learning it on the instrument.
Recorder, if it wasn't so annoying, would be great. I think kids should be taught to play something else, personally, because I mean, when I want to mess with my parents, I get out my recorder from 5th grade and I just start going at it, and they hate me when I do that.
Yeah, I remember doing that, and it, like, I feel like they tried to teach everyone, but obviously I feel like a lot of people just didn't. They just played whatever they wanted to, and it sounded very squeaky, and it was a mess. So I think I don't know, I don't think it's like necessarily you need to do it. I mean, I guess it's like good experience, but at the same time, like no one really, at least at my school, no one ever like paid attention enough to like be able to play a full
like they
song.
should just make it more engaging so students are more willing to do it. Because I mean, the recorder, it just sounds awful. There's no other way to put it. It's a really bad clarinet, is what it is. And
Just a broken whistle.
So, I actually had kind of a unique situation growing up. I went to a private Catholic school, and I didn't do recorder. Starting in 5th grade, we actually had 5th grade band. So we were able to pick an instrument and learn that instrument and play music together. And then in middle school, because I went to a pre-K through 8, because of course I did, then the middle school bands took the 5th grade bands and kind of nurtured that musical interest. So I feel like that was a really cool way to do it because you got to learn an instrument you actually wanted to learn. And then if you wanted to later on, you could keep doing that with the same instructors so they knew where you were at and they could like help you. It was really interesting.
I think we should like move on to
I think
like
we should move on. Yeah, we're getting a little distracted.
So mine was more about like the student-teacher relationship. How did that like fluctuate from the 19th century to modern day education? I originally started with like the hierarchy scale of it, but then I kind of went into depth of like the punishments and then like the benefits and then how that has like changed a lot. So like more of into like the punishments, but like some of them would even be like they would wear like the dunce cone hat and they would have to sit in the corner and just not participate at all. But then that child's not getting that education in. They're not learning anything. They're just learning that bad actions lead to bad actions, which is good, but does that really benefit them?
Like leading back to early childhood education, timeouts do nothing. I just wanted to throw that in there. I forgot to add that. Timeouts just teach kids to not engage anymore. Because when a child throws a fit, they're actually trying to show you that they trust you and that they're willing to work with you. They just don't know how to regulate it yet. But anyway, back to you, Oakley.
Yeah, kind of going off of both of what you were saying. It's like the sitting in the corner. I remember, I was never one of these kids, but I remember distinctly kids being sent out into the hall because they couldn't stop talking. And I feel like that disruption to their learning is more harmful in the long run. Is that what you
because there was even some of that would be like public punishments, like getting pulled to the front of the class and getting your pants pulled down and smacked on behind. Like that was definitely one of those that was like, what the heck? Why are you now disturbing everyone's learning from this one incident? You couldn't have just dealt with it later?
Do you think it's like more on the parents' job to punish the kid if they do something wrong, or the teachers?
See, what I found in an article, who was it by? From Sweden educator Philip I'm gonna murder this guy's name. Feldenberg. He taught that like there was a positive approach to the punishment instead of like an actual punishment of like, hey, what's wrong? Why did you do this? But there's also that point of in an article from, what was this, 19 something, but that it gave the teachers in place of the parent, so deciding their punishment as they were the parent of the room or something like that. They are in charge. They get to dictate what actually happens and who's punished in what scenario. But also like, it's weird how like nowadays, like we don't see that anymore. Like if I were to disrupt our English class, which literally would never happen because our class is so quiet. But like if so, the teacher would just call on me and be like, hey, Oakley, can you just like quiet down a little, please? We're trying to learn over here. And I'm like, okay, loser. I think you're learning, I guess.
I think it would be pretty funny. Just like the professor walks up and just slaps you.
Just be like, no, bad. But now we have that like mutual communication of, hey, I'm your friend, you're my friend. Let's learn together. That kind of scenario.
Yeah, more like a friendship aspect instead of like parent and child aspect. Okay.
How does that friend, like, close relationship benefit students later on?
So, say you had your favorite teacher, Mr. Reneke from English, middle school, 8th grade, not any particular person or anything. This is totally random, guys. They use your favorite teacher and made you love English so much, and he would make you feel that every time that you would use it, that it was like the best thing in the world. That you would always want to write, you wanted to become an author, you wanted to do something special with English. But then the next year, you were in a different English class, and that English class was not the same. Now you don't feel that way and prompt of the English class because you're in a different place. You don't know these people.
Going off of like that like friend or like teacher like feeling, how do you feel about like the difference between like being a student in high school and those teachers and then being a student in college and with like your professor?
College is so much different. Oh my gosh, how do I even begin? Like, I know some people in some of my classes will like stay at the end of the class and like talk to the teacher and like will ask questions afterwards, or even just like during the class and be that like very social person.
I personally was really close to a lot of my teachers in high school. Like, it would always instantly, I would try to have a somewhat of a relationship with them and like be able, it was just a lot more like better than college. I feel like because there's so many kids in some of my classes, I can't really get to know my teacher as well. And again, there's also so many kids that go talk like to a professor after class, and there's like no chance for me to even do that. And I feel like it's definitely way different than middle school and high school.
Going off, well, not you, but like off the other things, like saying how we have like a better relationship with the professors. Do you think it's because like in like high school and stuff, like the teaching thing is a lot more stricter and like your schedule is a lot more stricter, so you have less time?
I would say definitely, just because, well, now we all have a free system. I can have my class whenever I feel like it, instead of having to be stuck to 8 to 3 o'clock in the same building, 10 minutes apart from each class to just walk. Like, what the heck? What's up?
Should we move on to the effects of COVID?
I think that would be great.
Okay, let's move on.
Well, this conversation would be a lot different if we were talking like 4 years ago. From the research that I did, the largest community that was like affected by the pandemic in schools were students with disabilities, and by disabilities I mean like speech, physical disabilities, cognitive, emotional, behavioral, all of the big array of disabilities. The teachers in high school settings, honestly, from the research that I did, they showed they had an easier time transitioning through the pandemic, going from having in-person to whatever the school decided to do. The teachers would have to alter how they interacted with the whole classroom, but also those students with disabilities. Students with emotional and behavioral disabilities were the most impacted of all students with disabilities. And in the sense of,
So how was your experience with it? Because you were a freshman in high school at the time. Because you were a freshman in high school at the time, right? How did that affect your experience throughout high school?
Throughout high school, I transitioned from an in-person high school student to more of an online student personally. Many of the students in my school followed a different path and remained mostly in person. Throughout high school, I had really rough anxiety and social anxieties, and so going online for the pandemic was actually kind of nice for me because I was able to learn things, but I wasn't having to be around all of the worries and stressors that were impacting my mental health. And then I continue to remain online for the rest of high school because of those benefits.
Speaking of like the online environment, like how do you think it like improved since like COVID and how it was beforehand where it was like barely a thing?
We definitely had to speed up the, I guess, improvements on the technology side because we were obviously progressing in this 21st century in terms of technology, but we had to speed it up quite a fair amount because of the pandemic. I'd say that there are more online support tools for students online, such as like the math.
Khan Academy.
Khan Academy is a good one, and then also apps on your phone where you can take a picture and it'll. Teachers don't need to know that.
I think we've all had to just like quickly peek how to do something because we didn't understand how to process the learning because you couldn't go back and listen or ask a teacher.
Yeah, and there are also just now more options for all of the students, whether you want to be a more hybrid student where it's both in person and online, if you want to be strictly online. There are just many more options for all of the different students.
Going off like the hybrid or online student, I know some of my professors before COVID, they just had purely lecture classes like in person, but nowadays they're forced to have at least one online classes. How do you think that like affected them?
For my mother specifically, because she's a teacher at the Pueblo Community College, she is being forced to be almost strictly online. And that's honestly really tough on her because she loves connecting personally face-to-face with all of her students. I know that for some professors it can be easier. It's just from my mom specifically, it's not as fun.
Going back to like COVID and being online, I personally struggled with that because I didn't get to socialize with people, and I think it was definitely close to a year, a couple months, like just not being able to go to school and like my routine being all messed up. Like it definitely took a toll on me, and I wasn't able to see my friends and I wasn't able to connect with anyone. And for me being online, I got better grades, but it was more difficult to learn, and I feel like I couldn't get as much help as I needed to.
Yeah, so my experience with COVID, I don't know if any of you guys kind of felt this too. My teachers in high school forced us to have cameras on for all of our Zoom lectures.
Mm-hmm.
And it was so weird because I had known some of these people for like 3 years at that point because I was a junior in high school, and I felt like I was in a very controlled setting where I could show people what I wanted them to see. And then when COVID happened, it felt like a huge invasion of privacy because all of a sudden I was in my childhood bedroom and they were seeing such a vulnerable side of me that typically I wouldn't have chosen for them to see.
I don't know if you did any research on this, but like speaking of kind of like what you said, I was wondering if you saw anything about like when like schools went completely online and kids had to get like some kind of electronic, but like some schools don't have the funding to that. Did you see any effect on those?
That's kind of interesting because it's kind of flip-flopped from what you would think. More private schools were less inclined to provide students with Chromebooks, yeah. More public schools, I think over 50%, which was more than the private schools.
Could that be from private schools expecting students to be able to afford a computer?
I think there's definitely that heavy influence of private schools being able, the students had the ability to have more access.
Unless they're on a scholarship, which is interesting.
Most of my teachers actually, when it was like the height of like being like quarantine, was they canceled like all the tests. You had no tests.
Yeah, that happened
Homework only.
Yeah.
Wow.
And they didn't even grade the homework.
Yeah.
They just were like, yeah, we're still doing school, guys.
Yeah,
you know,
it's basically school.
nothing
2-week
happened.
break.
So we all figured it out and we all quit. And then most of us quit, and then we were all like really confused the next year. It started a really bad snowball effect, which I have noticed has happened to everybody from personal experience and just seeing what's going on in our education system now.
So overall, it sounds like we all kind of come to the consensus that the American education system
Needs some improvement.
needs some improvement, but and like we've picked out some ways that like we could improve lower education, have like better technology implemented for people who want to go online and who feel more positive with that experience, and how cost can affect everything in school. And in every way, like, there's a lot of things that can be improved on, but also some things that we're doing pretty right, I feel like. Because like in test scores, yeah, we're not great at reading and science, but we're above average, and we're below places like Germany, United Kingdom, Switzerland in science. And I feel like knowing that like we're not the worst system out there can also be kind of a relief that we're not absolutely bottom of the barrel behind.
Yeah.
And you may also have like that good like benefit of like the encouraged of education, well, slightly encouraged, because like if you get higher education, like from what I said a while ago, you get a better job and like higher paying job if you go in there.
And even while you're in like public school, private school, you know, before college, if you do well, you can get scholarships or everything like that. So I feel like that's a good thing, but I also feel like that puts a little too much pressure on us as well, which is something we could improve on. I feel like stress and burnout is a huge problem in the United States. But you know, like Zae said, we're halfway. We're
decent.
We're
We're not at
decent.
the bottom of the list of.
Right.
Not
Yeah.
the worst.
We're not the best, not the worst.
And like
We're middle ground.
the burnout.
Silver lining, I guess.
So we're the silver lining. Yes.
Thank you for listening to our podcast, and hope you learned something by our discussion and you're able to take what you learned and implement it in your life beyond.
Yay!